I don't want to remember that shit. I don't know why, but that's just the case. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to be talking a lot about WannaCry and the latest iteration of which seems to have some weird Russian name to it, like Petsius or something like that. I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, we're going to be talking about that today. All the way from its current issues, what we're currently facing, all the way back down to its genesis, its origin, where the fuck all this stuff came from. I think it is terribly interesting that we are dealing with this yet again. Oh, it's Petya. That's what it is. Yeah, I think that I think a lot of things about this, and we're going to talk about all of them today, or at least most of it. I don't see that there's any real need to get all serious about Bitcoin at the moment. You know, it's still doing its recovery thing, and I haven't been checking the status of segregated witness and whether or not people have been getting duped into making that change. But yeah, I think that one will be very, very interesting in the future, in the not so distant future. Unfortunately, sooner than most of us would like. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and throw down our first dance for the evening, and this one is by Prong. It's off of Ruining Lives, here on CoinMetal. And that was 9 Inch Nails with March of the Pigs. Whew, man, I'll tell you what, it was a productive get your ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Wednesday, and I most certainly got my ass kicked. I don't know what it is. For some stupid reason, I always end up having to roll with the bigger of the guys in the class, and I don't know. I guess I'm just that skilled and I don't know it, right? I'll tell you what. If jiu-jitsu will teach you anything, it is to be very humble about your capabilities, because there's always somebody better than you. Always. I mean, it doesn't matter how long you've been at it. There's always somebody that's spent that much more time on the mat than you have and is that much more experienced than you are. Oh. And today I had the pleasure of rolling with this gentleman, very, very tall, of course, probably about my same weight, if not a little bit heavier. And I'm a pretty stocky guy, so that's saying something. And so, I mean, you know, I was trying to give as good as I got, and I didn't want to try and overpower him too much, just because, you know, he was new to it, you know, and I mean, I could have, you know, tried to abuse him a little harder than I did, but I mean, I took him close to an armbar. I at least made him fearful of it, and that's always a good feeling to have, you know, that you're able to execute that much control over somebody that's significantly larger than you. You know, I mean, like last time I rolled on Friday. No, not. It was last Wednesday, I think. I rolled with a gentleman that was quite a bit larger than me. I mean, the guy I rolled with today was bigger than me, but this guy was quite a bit larger than me. And I still managed to sweep him from a closed guard position, doing guard retention drills. And today I kind of screwed up my hamstring. Oh man. I don't think I like popped it or anything like that, but it didn't feel good. The guy that I was rolling with, he thought that he could switch his hips to where he was flat, and that I wouldn't be able to get on top of him, but I managed to get him to mount from there. It was pretty cool. Anyway, so yeah, we're not here to talk all about my jiu-jitsu experience today. We're here, in fact, to talk about some ransomware and this Petya business. Now, I've talked about this on the show before, and because, you know, we did have a little rash of this crap before, And I don't think this will be the last that we do see of it. And I wanted to preface with this one article that a friend of mine posted in IRC, and I thought it was just too cool. I did a cursory glance of it. I try not to plan too much on this show because it interrupts the flow. If I try and put too much will on it, it fucks everything up. But I do want to cover this information only because it's timely. You know, it's like as far as like what we actually cover and what articles we actually read or what I actually comment on. It's anybody's guess, man. I don't have a script. Anyway, so this first one is on rafcoster.com. It's spelled with a K. And for some fucking reason, I couldn't get it to load more than once. I got it to load on Internet Explorer, but I couldn't get it on Mozilla or Chrome for some fucking reason. I can't understand that. Anyway, the Internet as existential threat. This is written by Raf Koster, and it was authored on June 27th, 2017, and I'm going to assume from his name that he does have a penis. Some days I wonder if we are completely screwed. So today's post is a perhaps slightly hysterical outburst. The news is not paying enough attention to the Petya, non-Petya ransomware and the effects it is having on the Ukraine and on a bunch of businesses worldwide. I think it may be a harbinger of how the internet could kill us all. Based on what little I have read so far, a piece of widely used tax software, one used by the Ukrainian government, did its usual phone home to check for updates. Instead of getting back a few hundred bytes of acknowledgement, it got back a viral payload. Basically, this tax software served as a means of auto-updating the virus to thousands of targets. The result is not just accounting systems going down, though it is gas stations and point-of-sale systems in grocery stores. This kind of thing basically makes me wonder how long we'll have the internet. The whole premise of the internet is the connecting of disparate networks. It started out by only connecting computer networks, but today connects networks of vastly different sorts. Computers, yes, but also financial networks, distribution networks, road networks, water networks, power networks, communications networks, social networks. It truly is internet. As we rush towards putting more and more things in the cloud, as we rush towards an Internet of Things with no governance beyond profit motive and anarchy, what we're effectively doing is creating a massive single point of failure for every system we put in it. Think of a house with an alarm system on the doors, and a phone system, and power coming into the house, and water pipes, and so on. In your house, these are probably all separate connections to separate networks. If the water stops running, you don't tend to think that your phone will go down too, but you know that cutting the power at the mains renders the house vulnerable in a host of ways because so many things do connect to the electricity. Well, even without going so far as to buy internet-enabled juicers, quite a lot of that stuff actually has been connected to one point of failure, and it's not necessarily all things we term critical infrastructure. What we are building is basically a perfect scenario for collapse, where a commons is consumed by actors who either don't care or don't understand the collective damage that is possible in a connected system and the tipping points that can ensue. Most networks we come across in the real world follow power law distributions and are what we term scale-free networks. Basically, this is where most nodes on the network aren't that important, but there's a preferential attachment thing going on, where some nodes are superconnectors. They're really hard to destroy. You have to take out the biggest nodes all at once. But if a power law network is co-opted, you have a real problem. The internet is basically our biggest node now. Most of the big virus scares lately have been traced in one way or another back to state actors. Petya is based on an exploit the NSA kept secret that was then leaked to the general public and weaponized by hackers. As huge as their effects have been, consider that this implies fairly limited use. But picture a world where these tools of state actors are actually in the hands of random people and released at the frequencies that random people would engage in. I remember being in South Korea in the mid-2000s and watching a colleague's laptop get owned instantly just from connecting to hotel Wi-Fi without firewalls up. Within 10 seconds, the laptop was completely useless, locked up, conquered totally. Picture an internet like that. In such a world, the only people who can connect would be the ones with the wherewithal to do so, the money and the savvy and the ability to actually harden security. But just as critically, governments and state actors seem to be the source of so many of the problems precisely because the internet is now too many forms of critical infrastructure and therefore too juicy a target. If software eats everything, then the ability to kill software is the ability to kill anything. Net connectivity becomes the single point of failure for every system connected to it. Even if the net itself is designed to root around damage, that doesn't help if it is the single vector of attack that can take down any given target. It's too juicy a target for the military, too juicy a target for terror, too juicy a target for criminal ransom. The old adage goes, when they came for this, I said nothing. When they came for that, we all know it. Consider that the more we hand gleefully over to the cloud because we want convenience, big data, personalization, and so on, we're creating a single thing that can be taken from us in an instant. We've decided to subscribe to everything instead of owning it. When they came for your MP3s, your DVDs, fine, not critical infrastructure. When they came for your resumes, okay, getting closer. Your juicers, whatever, we can laugh at that because it seems ludicrous, but it's not. A typical U.S. city only has 3 days of food within the city limits because the internet has enabled just-in-time delivery of foodstuffs. Economic optimization within a network tends to imply specialization, which means that even those lovely rural communities that in theory grow their own food don't grow balanced diets locally. And you're laughing at the internet connected juicer? Your juicer is already internet connected. If that thing goes down, you don't get any more juice. It's just connected in a way you can't see. Now that gas stations play video ads on a loop above the station, now that every cash register is replaced with an internet-connected device, losing internet means no gas and no groceries. No gas means no trucks delivering the groceries, especially if we make them into self-driving trucks. We think of critical infrastructure in terms of government-owned or controlled utilities, but the food trucking fleet is critical infrastructure. It's owned by a massive patchwork of private entities and actually is networked into the air fleet and the shipping fleet as well via databases of shipping container IDs. Want to paralyze the world economy? Corrupt that ID database. If you have a smart Wi-Fi light bulb that's critical infrastructure because it can be owned by a botnet and used to attack. Hyperbolic? In a world where we take actual damage when something digital is attacked, any CPU is basically a weapon, and leaving internet-connected CPUs unattended is basically leaving armory doors open. take the example of these solar panels on my home. They are similar to the IoT light bulb, but the point is more pertinent. The solar system controller phones home in a variety of ways to provide information to me on how it is performing, but also to inform the grid about the power I am generating. Because there is no battery in my home, any excess power beyond my consumption must be fed back to the grid. Should solar panels feed more power into the grid than the grid can actually handle, this power must be offloaded elsewhere. Typically, California pays neighboring states to take it. If the power utilities failed to do so, the grid would actually explode. Literally explode. The result would be a cascading power failure covering several states. By connecting this solar controller to the internet, we've actually put a portion of the critical infrastructure of the entire power grid in the cloud where it is vulnerable. Is that the most direct vector of attack? No, of course not. I suspect you can't actually tell my solar controller to do much of anything. It's pretty stupid as smart devices go, but I have every expectation that someone wants to make direct bidirectional control possible because it's quote-unquote cool. Presumably regulation is stopping them. Yay, regulation! Please don't let Congress notice your existence. The only difference between my solar panels and a hydroelectric dam is scale. To the grid, they are all just nodes with differing power outputs. Yes, you could cut off my panel. You could cut off a hydroelectric plant too. The issue isn't whether the node in the network is severable. The issue is whether we are increasing the fragility of the system and thereby increasing the likelihood of cascade effects. Network connecting solar panels opens the possibility of things like malware attacks designed to cause them all to misreport, say, luckily the electricity grid has redundancies, fuses, switches, physical lines to sever. We can measure power flows independent of using the internet, so let's consider another example. Our medical systems have terrible internet security. MRI machines you can connect with the USB that still have admin password to gain root access. That's horrifying, sure, but that's not an attack at scale. More frightening, we're busily uploading all our medical records to the cloud. Take down that cloud and no patients can be treated because nobody will know what they have, what meds they are on. Software swallows your insulin pumps and your pacemakers. To kill people, all you need to do is hack that database or simply erase it or block access to it. After all, we don't tend to realize that in an Internet of Things, humans are just things too. As this software monster has encroached on stuff like election systems, the common reaction has been to go back to paper. So let's consider a less obvious example. We should be going back to paper for our libraries too. We've outsourced so much of our knowledge to digital that the amount of knowledge available in analog has dropped notably. There are less librarians in fewer libraries with smaller collections than there used to be. If the net goes down, how much reference material is simply not accessible that was 30 years ago? Google search is critical cultural infrastructure. How much redundancy do we actually have? Could a disconnected town actually educate its children? How critical is Google as a whole? If Google went down for a month, I am pretty sure we would see worldwide economic collapse. How much of the world economy passes through Google hosting? How much of it is in Gmail? How much of it is dependent on Google search, Google Images, Google Docs? The answer is a lot. And because financial systems are now also JIT, just in time, 10,000 corporate blips where real estate agencies and local car washes and a huge pile of software companies and a gaggle of universities and so on are suddenly 100% unable to function digitally. No payroll, no insurance verification, would absolutely have ripple effects into their suppliers and their customers, and thence to the worldwide economic market. Because interconnection without redundancy increases odds of cascades. It's actually normal for complex systems to go through collapse cascades. It's part of how they grow and develop. We just don't like it when it happens to us. In the current economic climate, there's this romance with the idea of monopoly. VCs like Peter Thiel speak approvingly of not funding anything unless it has a shot at monopoly. Some great achievements of technology probably wouldn't have happened without the monopolies that are currently enjoyed by most of the big names in tech. The usual arguments against monopolies are generally around how they stifle competition and hurt consumers. Consumers are okay with the tech monopolies because they largely see benefits right now. But the single biggest downside to these monopolies is actually lack of redundancy. If AWS went down for longer than the brief interval it did a while back, is there even enough capacity elsewhere? I have no idea. Probably there is, but what happens when instead of it being a minor inconvenience, it's actually gone? That's more like losing the hydroelectric dam than losing the solar panel. We should be thinking now about how we can create redundancy, resilience in all of these systems. The cloud isn't it. Big data isn't what we need. Small replicated data is. This is not solely a technological problem. I've often wanted to sit down with Mark Zuckerberg and argue with him about Facebook. It is premised on the notion that connecting everyone is an unmitigated good, but it's not. And for the exact same reasons as above, we don't have opinions, we share the opinions of those we know. We think and decide things like politics via viral mechanisms. The old school meaning of meme, nodes can be infected, can even be high-profile nodes, and they will have cascading effects on far larger populations. Actors who don't understand what they're doing, like say billionaire political activists, can basically release ideological malware into the population, not realizing the cascade effects because predicting chaotic systems is hard, and by connecting everyone, we're actually intentionally removing the firewalls and the fuses and the airlocks. Attacks on the idea of value of expertise are like taking down the immune system while giving the patient a cold. Right now, we've got shit in the water supply. It's possible the water gets so dirty that no one can drink from it anymore. This would be all of us saying the net is too dangerous to connect to. It's possible we all keep guzzling away and all die. Or maybe we can start getting smart and diversifying our water supply, getting smarter about cross-contamination, drill separate wells, and avoid tapping the same water table. This sort of problem is what birthed modern epidemiology long ago when Dr. Snow figured out a cholera epidemic source in London. Facebook is like all of us drinking from the same well. In general, I've come to believe that the norm for systems is to interconnect, to form larger networks, and for sub-areas in that network to evolve into specialization. In the process, they may lose autonomy. Eventually, they end up as appendages, sometimes vital, sometimes optional, to the larger organism. The larger network is almost certainly more powerful, more likely to survive, capable of greater things. But when it goes, everything in it goes too. Bits and bobs survive or dissolve back into constituent parts. Anything over-specialized at that point is almost certainly going to perish. to be used as building blocks for a different network. We're fine with this when we are the larger network. Paring our fingernails is no big deal, and the fingernails don't get to vote. When we are in the larger network, though, it's likely our individual benefit not to permit it to reach too high a level of interconnection, specialization, and sophistication. It simply means we're each more vulnerable to the failure of some strongly interconnected node way up the line, just like the tendon in our toe is screwed in if our nervous system gets shut down. Anyway, pay attention to Petya. Think about how much of your life is online. Assume every connected service will someday shutter. Consider your personal strategies and contemplate the larger scale. I'm not a radical individualist, not by a long shot. Not the sort to say we should hoard gold or have self-sufficient farms in our backyards. But I am someone who more than once has built entire complex communities with hundreds of thousands of nodes, technological and human nodes, and watched them fall prey to single points of failure. This isn't about cute internet of shit jokes anymore. It's about how gangrene spreads. Very nice. Very nice. And like the first comment on here, you don't even sound hysterical. Absolutely. This guy does not sound hysterical. And it does sound all very, very plausible. Thank you very much. It was a well-written article. I only had to add a couple words, and that was on Ralph Koster's website. And if you can actually get it to come up, good on you. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Internet of Things. I've made no compunction about mentioning that on this show, that I'm kind of against the greater interconnectedness of things. It's like I was telling a friend the other day, I have a dumb phone. You know, I mean, sure, it can't connect to the internet and it can't use Google and whatnot, but it's still a phone. You know, I mean, if everything but like the phone and the electricity went down, you know, if there was like some major fuck up at Google or whatnot, my phone would still work. I mean, assuming of course AT&T isn't so tied into them that they don't work anymore without them. I don't know, but I think the mentality is clear here that you should have devices that can operate on their own without being on the internet. I mean, I'm really annoyed at some products, how far they've gone in the lack of functionality a device has, unless of course you hook it to the internet. It's kind of disturbing. It speaks to me of over-dependence, you know. Anyway, I want to go ahead and throw in a little bit of music here. I'm going to go ahead, Sepultura, Arise, or actually Subtraction off of Arise, here on CoinMetal. And that was Anthrax with Evil Twin. Very, very tasty song. That was off of For All Kings, if you are unfamiliar with it. And I believe they are still touring in support of that album now. Although, I seem to recall having seen something about them touring with like Megadeth and somebody else. In which case, that would be pretty awesome. Anyway, as we are talking about ransomware and security issues, I caught this one while I was trolling around for fodder on the old Twitter feed. I don't know that I found this one on Twitter, but I think I might have actually found it through a Google search. But it's terribly pertinent, and the name might surprise you as far as the author. But the title here, Trusted Third Parties Are Security Holes. This was by Mr. Nick Szabo, originally published in 2001. Introduction. Commercial security is a matter of solving the practical problems of business relationships such as privacy, integrity, protecting property, or detecting breach of contract. A security hole is any weakness that increases the risk of violating these goals. In this real-world view of security, a problem does not appear because a designer assumes it away. I'm going to reread that. That just sounded weird. A security hole is any weakness that increases the risk of violating these goals. In this real-world view of security, a problem does not disappear because the designer assumes it away. The invocation or assumption in a security protocol design of a trusted third party, TTP, or a trusted computing base, TCB, controlled by a third party constitutes the introduction of a security hole into that design. The security hole will then need to be plugged by other means. If the risks and costs of TTP institutional alternatives were not accounted for in the protocol design, the resulting protocol will in most cases be too costly or risky to be practical. If the protocol beats these odds and proves practical, it will only succeed after extensive effort has gone into plugging the TTP security holes. TTP assumptions cause most of the costs and risks in a security protocol, and plugging TTP security holes produces the most benefit and profit. As a result, we propose a security protocol design methodology whereby the most risky and expensive parts of a security protocol, the trusted third parties, are designed in parallel with security protocols using those parties. The objectives of cost and risk minimalization are focused on the TTPs rather than the security protocols themselves, which should be designed to suit the cost and risk minimized TTPs. We also briefly discuss and reference research and implementation in security mechanisms that radically reduce trusted third-party costs and risks by distributing automated TTPs across several parties, only a portion of which need to act in a reliable or trustworthy manner for the protocol to be reliable or trustworthy. New trusted third parties are costly and risky. The author has professional experience implementing a TTP that was first assumed by early advocates of public key cryptography. This TTP has come to be called a certificate authority, CA. It has been given the responsibility of vouching for the identity of participants. Here I focus on the costs imposed by the TTP alternatives such as PGP's Web of Trust, and SPKI have been discussed amply elsewhere. The certificate authority has proved to be by far the most expensive component of this centralized public key infrastructure, PKI. This is exacerbated when the necessity for a TTP, trusted third party, deemed by protocol designers is translated in PKI standards, such as SSL and S/MIME, into a requirement for a TTP. A TTP that must be trusted by all users of a protocol becomes an arbiter of who may and may not use the protocol. And all my shit just vanished for a moment there. So, for example, let's see here, where were we? That must be trust protocol. So that, for example, to run a secure SSL web server or to participate in S/MIME, one must obtain from a mutually trusted security authority, a certificate from a mutually trusted certificate authority. The earliest and most popular of these has been VeriSign. It has been able to change several hundred dollars for end user certificates. far outstripping the few dollars charged implicitly in the cost of end-user software for the security protocol code itself. The bureaucratic process of applying for and renewing certificates takes up far more time than configuring the SSL options, and the CA's identification process is subject to greater exposure than the SSL protocol itself. VeriSign amassed a stock market valuation in the tens of billions of US dollars even before it went into another TTP business, the Internet Domain System, DNS, by acquiring Network Solutions. How? By coming up with a solution, any solution, almost as its security is quite crude and costly compared to the cryptographic components of a PKI. To the seemingly innocuous assumption of a trusted third party made by the designers of the public key protocols for email and the web. Some more problems with CAs can be dealt with here, and I'm not going to do that. The Internet DNS is another example of the high costs and risks imposed by a TTP. This is one tiny part of the TCP/IP protocol stack has accounted for a majority of the disputes and hand-wringing involving that protocol. Why? Because it is one of the few areas of the TCP/IP stack that depends on a centralized hierarchy of TTPs rather than protocol negotiations between individual internet nodes. The DNS is also the single component of the internet most likely to fall, even when its names are not being disputed or spoofed. The high costs of implementing a TTP come about mainly because traditional security solutions, which must be invoked where the protocol itself leaves off, involve high personnel costs. For more information on the necessity and security benefits of these traditional security solutions, especially personnel controls, when implementing TTP organizations, see this author's essay on group controls. Dude, that should have been like off on the side somewhere. The risks and costs borne by protocol users also come to be dominated by the unreliability of the TTP, the DNS, and certificate authorities being two quite common sources of unreliability and frustration with the Internet and PKIs, respectively. Existing trusted third parties are valuable. Companies like Visa, Dun & Bradstreet, Underwriters Laboratories, and so forth connect untrusting strangers into a common trusted network. Our economy depends on them. Many developing countries lack these trusted hubs and would benefit greatly from integrating with developed world hubs like these. While these organizations often have many flaws and weaknesses, credit card companies, for example, have growing problems with fraud, identity theft, and inaccurate reports. And Barings recently went belly up because their control systems had not properly adapted to digital securities trading. By and large, these institutions will be with us for a long time. This doesn't help us get TTPs for new protocols. These institutions have a particular way of doing business that is highly evolved and specialized. They usually cannot hill climb to a substantially different way of doing business. Substantial innovations in new areas, ergo e-commerce and digital security, must come from elsewhere. Any new protocol design, especially paradigmatically different areas such as capabilities or cryptographic computations, will be a mismatch for the existing institutions. Since building new TTPs from scratch is so costly, it is far cheaper when introducing protocols from these institutionally novel security technologies to minimize their dependencies on TTPs. New trusted third parties can be tempting. and not at all more secure. Many are the reasons why organizations may come to favor costly TTP-based security over more efficient and effective security that minimizes the use of TTPs. Limitations of imagination, effort, knowledge, or time amongst protocol designers. It is far easier to design security protocols that rely on TTPs than those that do not, i.e., to fob off the problem rather than to solve it. Naturally, design costs are an important factor limiting progress toward minimizing TTPs in security protocols. A big factor is lack of awareness of the importance of the problem among many security architects, especially the corporate architects who draft internet and wireless security standards. The temptation to claim the high ground as a TTP of choice are great. The ambition to become the next Visa or VeriSign is a power trip that's hard to refuse. The barriers to actually building a successful TTP business are, however, often severe. The startup costs are substantial. Ongoing costs remain high. Liability risks are great, and unless there is a substantial first mover advantage, barriers to entry for competitors are few. Still, if nobody solves the TTP problems in the protocol, this can be a lucrative business, and it's easy to envy big winners like VeriSign rather than remembering all the now obscure companies that tried but lost. It's also easy to imagine oneself as the successful TTP and come to advocate the security protocol that requires the TTP rather than trying harder to actually solve the security problem. I think we did that with Bitcoin, where we just made it everybody's problem. I think you should be more explicit here in step 2. From What's So Funny About Science by Sidney Harris, 1977. Entrenched interests. Large numbers of articulate professionals make their living using the skills necessary in TTP organizations. For example, the legions of auditors and lawyers who create and operate traditional control structures and legal protections. They naturally favor security models that assume they must step in and implement the real security. In new areas like e-commerce, they favor new business models based on TTPs, ergo application service providers, rather than taking the time to learn new practices that may threaten their old skills. Mental transaction costs. Trust, like taste, is a subjective judgment. Making such judgment requires mental effort. A third party with a good reputation and that is actually trustworthy can save its customers from having to do so much research or bear other costs associated with making these judgments. However, entities that claim to be trusted but end up not being trustworthy impose costs not only of a direct nature when they breach the trust, but increase the general cost of trying to choose between trustworthy and treacherous trusted third parties. Ethereum. Personal property has not and should not depend on TTPs. Oh God, I couldn't have even said it better. Ethereum. For most of human history, the dominant form of property has been personal property. The functionality of personal property has not under normal conditions ever depended on trusted third parties. The safest hands are always your own. Security properties of simple goods could be verified at sale for or first use, and there was no need for continued interaction between the manufacturer or other third parties, other than on occasional repair personnel after exceptional use and on a voluntary and temporary basis. Property rights for many kinds of chattel, portable property, were only minimally dependent on third parties. The problem where TTPs were needed was to defend against depredations of other third parties. The main security property of personal channel was often not other TTPs as protectors, but rather its portability and intimacy. Here are some examples of the ubiquity of personal property in which there was a reality or at least a strong desire on the part of owners to be free of dependence on TTPs for functionality or security. Jewelry. Number 1. Far more often used for money in traditional cultures than coins. Ergo, Northern Europe up to 1000 AD had and worn on the body for better property protection as well as decoration. Number 2. Automobiles operated by and house doors opened by personal keys. 3. Personal computers. In the original visions of many personal computing pioneers, ergo many members of the Homebrew Computer Club, the PC was intended as personal property. The owner would have total control and understanding of the software running on the PC, including the ability to copy bits on the PC at will. Software complexity, internet connectivity, and unresolved incentive mismatches between software publishers and users, PC owners, have substantially eroded the reality of the personal computer as personal property. We can take that back. This desire is instinctive and remains today. It manifests in consumer resistance when they discover unexpected dependence on and vulnerability to third parties and devices they use. Suggestions that the functionality of personal property be dependent on third parties, even agreed to ones under strict conditions such as creditors until a chattel loan is paid off, a smart lien, are met with strong resistance, making personal property functionality dependent on trusted third parties, i.e. trusted rather than forced by the protocol to keep the agreement governing the security protocol and property, is in most cases quite unacceptable. TTP minimizing methodology. We now propose a security protocol design methodology whereby protocols are designed to minimize these costs and risks of the TTPs. Minimizing the costs and risks of the security protocols themselves is an important but secondary priority. Currently, security developers usually invoke or assume TTPs to suit the most elegant and secure, or at least computationally costly security protocol. These naive TTPs are then used in a proof of concept of an overall protocol architecture, but this does not discover the important things that need to be discovered. Once a security protocol is implemented, the code itself costs very little, and exponential cost functions such as Moore's Law keep reducing computational, bandwidth, and other technological costs. The cost of the security protocol itself, except for the cost of the message rounds limited by the speed of light, and the cost of the user interface limited by mental transaction costs, approach zero. By far the largest long-term costs of the system, as we learned with PKI, are the cost of implementing the TTPs. It's far more fruitful to estimate from the beginning what the TTPs will cost, rather than try to design the security protocols to minimize the costs of the TTPs. This will likely bring the designer to quite different trust assumptions and thus security protocols than if she assumes pure unanalyzed TTPs in certain places in order to simplify the security protocol. A natural corollary is if there exists a security protocol that can eliminate or greatly reduce the cost of a TTP, then it pays greatly to implement it, rather than one which assumes a costly TTP. even if the latter security protocol is simpler and much more computationally efficient. And therein lies some argument against SegWit and Lightning Network and all that. There are several other important considerations, including design costs. Number 1. Minimizing TTPs often involves learning and applying non-intuitive and complex cryptographic and fault tolerance techniques. Like some of those mentioned below, this can be a major burden or impractical for a small smart contracts project. On the other hand, design costs for a novel TTP institution are usually much higher than the design costs for a new protocol, as expensive as the latter may be. Determining whether the new institution is robust over the long term is more expensive still. While protocols can be formally analyzed and implementations audited against this analysis to achieve a very high level of confidence in a typical product development time frame. Number 2. User mental transaction costs. Multiplying TTPs, even one with a reasonably limited function, can quickly tax the ability of end users to track the reputation and quality of the different trusted brands. When TTPs are distributed, as in the technology described below, reputation tracking must be automated, which is much easier when the TTPs redundantly perform the same function. If, for a new context like e-commerce, we can find a security protocol which replaces a TTP organization, such as a bank, a complex set of traditions quite unproven in the new context, with mathematics, which at least in itself is quite clear and provable, it will often be a very, very big win to do so. More often, we will replace a complex, costly TTP with one or more much simpler TTPs plus mathematics. Miners. That too is a big win. We can only tell if and by how much it is a win by focusing on the trust assumptions and the resulting costs of the TTPs, rather than focusing on the efficiency of the security protocol. The key is to focus on the costs of the TTPs and design the security protocol to minimize them, rather than assuming TTPs in order to simplify or optimize the efficiency of the security protocol. A good digital security protocol designer is not only an expert in computer science and cryptography, but also very knowledgeable about the traditional costly techniques of physical security, auditing, law, and the business relationships to be secured. This knowledge is not used to substitute these costly security methods for more cost-effective digital security, but in order to minimize hidden dependence on costly methods for the real security. A good protocol designer also designs rather than merely assumes TTPs that work with minimal use of costly techniques. TTP minimizing protocols. We saw above that keys to minimizing TTPs are to identify them, characterize them, estimate their costs and risks, and then design protocols around TTPs of minimal cost and risk. When the risk is mitigated with techniques like those in this session, it can be very substantially reduced. 3 areas of research and implementation show special promise in improving trust. 2 of these involve the particularly thorny idea of privacy, where breach of trust is often irreversible. Once data gets out, it can be impossible to put back. The first protocol family in which trust can be distributed to preserve privacy is the Chow mixes. Mixes allow communications immune from third-party tracing. Only any one out of n proxies in a proxy chain need to be trustworthy for the privacy to be preserved. Unfortunately, all n of the proxies need to be reliable, or the message will be lost and must be resent. The digital mixed protocol's trade-off is to increase messaging delays, resends, in order to minimize the risk of irreversible privacy loss. Another protocol family in which trust can be distributed to preserve privacy is the multi-party private computations. Here, a virtual computer is distributed across the n parties who provide specifically encrypted input to each other rather than to a trusted third party. The distributed computer takes inputs from each of the n parties, computes an agreed to algorithm, then outputs the answer. Sounds a lot like Bitcoin, doesn't it? Each party learns only the answer, not the inputs of any other party. The threshold of parties bastard, you added two that's in there. The threshold of parties that must collude to violate privacy or threaten reliability can be traded off and have been studied in detail in the ample literature on this topic. Multi-party private computations can be used for confidential auditing, confidential preference gathering, and data mining, auctions, and exchanges with confidential bids, and so on. A protocol family that replicates data and distributes operations on that data while preserving the integrity of that data are the Byzantine resilient replicated databases. Implementations of Byzantine resilient replicated databases include Fleet and Phalanx. Fleet implementations replicated persistence of general-purpose objects. Some open-source implementations which approach but do not achieve Byzantine resilience, general-purpose, or complete decentralization include Mojo Nation and Freenet. Applications include secure name registries and property titles, as well as securely published content in Mojo Nation and Freenet. The most advanced work in this area involves Byzantine fault-tolerant quorum systems and other recent advanced in distributed security. It is important to note that these threshold techniques are only meant to enhance the integrity of a single step or run of the protocol. Practical systems such as Mojo Nation combine a majority or supermajority with a particular run with failure detection and choice by clients of servers between runs. So we can add back all the reputation systems, auditing, and so on that add robustness in the long term to distributed systems. The majorities or supermajorities within an invocation create a very good short-term robustness that is missing from current systems like Freenet and Mojo Nation. It's only partly missing from Mojo, which has a 4 of 8 voting scheme, but this has not been shown to be Byzantine resilient up to 4 of 8. Remote attestation of server code. Remote attestation has been proposed for verifying the state of software running on clients to protect intellectual property. A more valuable use for remote attestation is for verifying the behavior of servers. This is also called the transparent server approach. Through remote attestation, clients can verify that the specified desired code is running on a server. Combined with the ability to audit that code as open source, remote attestation of servers can greatly decrease the vulnerability of clients and users to the server. Given the importance of the trusted third-party problem we have discussed here, this approach has vast potential to convert trusted third-party protocols into secure protocols, and make possible a wide variety of secure protocols that were heretofore impossible. For example, Hal Finney has implemented a version of BitGold called Reusable Proofs of Work, based on a secure coprocessor board that allows users to remotely attest the code running on the card. While one still needs to trust the manufacturer of the card, this manufacturer is separated from the installation of server code onto the operation of the server on the card, leaving small holes unplugged. Often, the protocol designer can't figure out how to fix a vulnerability. If the attack one needs to a TTP to protect against is not a serious real-world threat in the context of the application the designer is trying to secure, it is better to simply leave the small hole unplugged than to assume the task of a TTP. In the case of public key cryptography, for example, protocol designers haven't figured out how to prevent a man-in-the-middle attack during the initial key exchange. SSL tried to prevent this by requiring CAs as trusted third parties, as described above, and this solution cost the web community billions of dollars in certificate fees and lost opportunities to secure communications. SSH, on the other hand, decided to simply leave this small hole unplugged. The man in the middle hole has, to the best of my knowledge, never even once been exploited to compromise the privacy of an SSH user. Yet SSH is far more widely used to protect privacy than SSL, at a tiny fraction of the cost. This economical approach to security has been looked at great length by Ian Grigg. Unscrambling the terminology. Alan Karp, Mark Miller, and others have observed the confusion over words like trust and trusted as used in the security community and proposed replacing the verb trusts with is vulnerable to. The substitution is a great way to radically clarify security protocol designs. Trusted third party, as used in this essay, becomes vulnerable to a third party, and the point of this paper, that this is a security hole, becomes obvious. In the context of protocol designs, instead of saying the protocol designer trusts some little-known generic class of parties, referred to in the singular as a trusted third party, with a given authorization, which probably really means the protocol designer just can't figure out how to plug a security hole. An honest protocol designer will admit that there is a vulnerability here, and that it is up to out-of-band mechanisms to plug or minimize, or up to users to knowledgeably ignore that hole. The class of parties is little known because security protocol designers typically don't know much about traditional non-digital security, legal, and institutional solutions needed to make such a party trustworthy. The substitution of vulnerable to for trusted works well in protocol design and in communicating honestly about the security of a protocol. Alas, there are security designers and sellers of security systems who invoke trusted third parties, trusted computing, and the like, really going to come out and admit that their protocols are vulnerable? Security designs sound so much more secure when they use the euphemism trust. In the real world, beyond the technical context of security protocol design, trust has a variety of meanings. One different use of trust is well-informed trust. For example, I trust this armor to protect me from normal bullets because it's been very well tested. I trust this site with this authorization because we're using a strong security protocol to protect me when I grant this authorization. Or, I trust my wife with the kids, in which cases translating trust to am vulnerable to would be to reverse its meaning. That trust can take on particularly opposite meanings depending on the context. Is another strong argument for avoiding use of the word when describing the vulnerabilities or lack thereof, for avoiding use of the word when describing of security protocols. Whether a designer thinks he does or must trust some generic class of parties is one thing. Whether a particular user will actually trust a particular entity in that class when the protocol actually runs is quite another matter. Whether either the user's trust or the designer's trust is well informed is yet another matter still. Conclusion. Traditional security is costly and risky. Digital security, when designed well, diminishes dramatically in cost over time. When a protocol designer invokes or assumes a TTP, he or she is creating the need for a novel organization to try to solve an unresolved security problem via traditional security and control methods. Especially in a digital context, these methods require continuing high expenditures by the TTP, and the TTP creates a bottleneck which imposes continuing high costs and risks on the end user. A far better methodology is to work starting from TTPs that are either well-known or easy to characterize and of minimal cost. The best TTP of all is one that does not exist, but the necessity for which has been eliminated by the protocol design, or which has been automated and distributed amongst the parties to a protocol. The later strategy has given rise to the most promising areas of security protocol research, including digital mixes, multi-party private computations, and Byzantine resilient databases. These and similar implementations will be used to radically reduce the cost of current TTPs and to solve the many outstanding problems in privacy, integrity, property rights, and contract enforcement, while minimizing the very high costs of creating and operating new TTP institutions. Very, very good, Mr. Szabo. Yeah, I'm not going to go ahead and read the acknowledgments. We've acknowledged Mr. Szabo's contribution and the fact that this is on the NakamotoInstitute.org. And this was originally published in 2001. I mean, yeah. So, yeah, we're still facing these same issues. You know, my argument against segregated witness is that it will create the necessity for TTPs. The supposed network topology that's going to take advantage of segregated witness for all the scaling options is currently the Lightning Node network, or that's at least the most widely proposed one. And if you look at the functionality, or the way that it's described to function, it will create a trusted third party that does not currently exist within the Bitcoin node topology, you know, between miners and nodes and all that business. And there are already more than enough of those existing as is. You know, I mean, I heard somewhere that somebody was like licensing out nodes. You know, they were renting out nodes for businesses. That just screams of central point of failure. You know, and I mean it's one of the things that we're trying to avoid with Bitcoin. Correct? I mean, you know, we're trying to divest from the central point of failure of the Federal Reserve note and their networks, you know. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and drop into a little bit of music here, a little bit of Fear Factory for you, Obsolete, here on CoinMetal. And that was Universal Law by Prong. I don't know what it is. Some of the sometimes when I select stuff on here, it completely goofs on me. I think it was because I made some modifications in my directories, and so now the program doesn't know where half the shit is. Anyway, so yeah, the trusted third party thing, I wanted to get into that a little bit, as it bears a really important part on what we're currently facing with regard to this ransomware attack bullshit. I mean, because if you really want to get down to it, it's like third parties all the way down, or quote unquote trusted third parties all the way down. I mean, so like the first trusted party involved in all of this shit was the NSA, because the NSA contracted the creation of Eternal Blue, or the study or whatever of that particular exploit. And then it was disseminated because their third party that created it or whatever was hacked by another hacking group who hacked into them and then hacked the NSA and hacked all kinds of shit that some of it was even not on the clear web, which leads me to believe it was actually honeypotted there, left to be discovered to provide, get this, and I know this is conspiratorial and shit, but to provide plausible deniability for actual live uses of this software on the public. Now, follow me here. I actually read an article, and I think I had the tab open, suggesting that the purpose of all this ransomware business is not profit. And I didn't actually read it far enough to determine what that was, but I'm hoping that I actually have the tab open. I closed my browser window. It's a rarity, but it happens. And when I did, I think I got rid of that one. Oh, that's one I want to cover next. Maybe. I don't know. I don't have any real order in my tabs on my browser. I should probably do that before I actually log on and all that. So anyway, as we were saying, trusted third parties all the way through here. From the NSA to the third party that the NSA contracted to work on the exploit, to all the people that are now utilizing it. Now, as I was saying, the possibility that a state actor would want to use some variant of this software against civilian infrastructure for some extended military interest or current military interest. It's conceivable. It's conceivable, entirely conceivable. Especially when you look back to things like Stuxnet. Stuxnet, again, was, I think that was actually the DOD that asked for that one. I don't know, but it ended up getting out in the public. And it was designed to corrupt internet connected controllers for shit, and non-internet connected controllers, because it was actually imported to its target via a USB drive, as was intended. But the point being that these tools are being created by state actors, okay, or proxies therefore, and used by proxies therefore. And like I said, I think that there's a very real possibility that they're actually cyber war weapons being used by state actors now, given the cloak of plausible deniability because of the public dissemination of these tools. I mean, they can sit there and say, "Fuck, Russia did it! Russia did it! It's called Petya! It's Russia!" Without any real evidence to corroborate that. But it's just as likely, someone in the DOD or someone in the Pentagon or someone in the White House or somebody in the State Department, somebody in NATO. So let's fire this thing off. Let's do some damage. See what happens. Let's pull the trigger on this bad boy. And the the biggest problem in the internet, that as that first article that we covered, could act as the transfer medium delivering this virus or this virus package to unintended parties like all over the fucking world. I mean, if it's connected to the internet, it's potentially vulnerable, I would say. Unless, of course, it was a targeted attack. Which, given the fact that it happened in the Ukraine a lot, kind of makes me wonder if it wasn't publicly disseminated in order to give plausible deniability for state actors utilizing it against civilian populations and networks. Unfortunately, because everything is fucking interconnected, the shit can escape containment. And before you know it, you could be dealing with that shit too. As Maersk is feeling right now. I don't know if I read it today or the other day, but Maersk was hit with this Petya shit, and they're completely fucked. I got another one here. This one's on the register. I don't know if that's a good, reliable source, but we're gonna go with it anyway because it's topical. If I feel like they're over sensationalizing it towards some particular lean, I'll abandon it. I don't like that shit. Anyway, viruses, cough cough, Petya, goes postal at FedEx, shares halted. And this is off of theregister.co.uk. TNT Express systems blown up by... Yep, you get the idea. And this is written by, I guess, Lane Thompson. No indication of penis or no picture. FedEx has suspended trading of its shares on the New York Stock Exchange after admitting that its subsidiary TNT Express has been hit by an information system virus. The big package giant said no information had been stolen by the cyber nasty, and only some offices of the TNT Express appear to have been disrupted. After yesterday's global Petya outbreak, what the fuck is that all about? It would be logical to assume that the file-scrambling bastardware has claimed another victim. Yeah, this is too fucking sensational. I'm sorry. I like being the thing that spruces it up, not... Anyway, but yeah, you get the idea. Somebody else was hit by Petya, but this one, this is kind of interesting to me. This is on TechCrunch.com, and I haven't read this, so we may yet abandon this one too, because we do that sort of thing on this show. And this one was written by Taylor Hatmaker. In aftermath of Petya, Congressman asks NSA to stop the attack if it knows how. This is just darling. Just darling. Today, Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu of California wrote to the NSA in an appeal for the agency to do anything in its power to stop the spread of the global ransomware or potentially just disguised as ransomware attack that began yesterday. And actually, we're gonna click on that because that seemed to be something that, okay, all right, yeah, that's the one. Okay, remember the point that I alluded to earlier about this not actually being a ransomware attack? There's another article here on TechCruncher. It kind of alludes to that. Anyway, continuing. Well, let's see. It began yesterday. Okay. Lieu seeks to hold the NSA accountable for its leaked exploit known as Eternal Blue, which appears to have facilitated the malware's spread. Last month, ransomware known as WannaCry also leveraged Eternal Blue in order to spread between networked machines that have not been updated to protect them from the vulnerability, which Microsoft issued a patch for back in March. Based on various reports, it appears that 2 global ransomware attacks likely occurred because the NSA's hacking tools were released to the public by an organization called the Shadow Brokers, Liu wrote. My first and urgent request is that if the NSA knows how to stop this global malware attack or has information that can help stop the attack, then NSA should immediately disclose it. If the NSA has a kill switch for this new malware attack, the NSA should deploy it now. Liu went on to implore the spy agency to communicate more openly with major tech companies about the vulnerabilities that it discovers in their systems. In the case of Eternal Blue, the NSA is believed to have known about the exploit for years. Naturally, that makes one wonder what other massive exploits the agency has up its sleeve and how easily those could be exposed in a new Shadow Brokers leak. Edward Snowden, a little tweet by Edward Snowden here. If you're a journalist writing about this, remember, this worm spreads based on a vulnerability NSA kept unfixed for years. And then it's got Eternal Blue hashtagged there. Given the ongoing threat, I urge the NSA to continue actively working with companies like Microsoft to notify them of software vulnerabilities of which the agency is aware. Liu said, I also urge the NSA to disclose to Microsoft and other entities what it knows that can help prevent future attacks based on malware created by the NSA. Some things about yesterday's ransomware attack make it even nastier than its predecessor WannaCry, as IEE senior member and Ulster University cybersecurity professor Kevin Curran explained to TechCrunch. One key difference from WannaCry is that Petya does not simply encrypt disk files, but rather locks the entire disk so nothing can be executed. It does it by encrypting the file system's master file table so the operating system cannot retrieve files. The other big difference, WannaCry had a kill switch, even if it was serendipitous. It does seem to have the same deadly replication feature of WannaCry, which enables it to spread quickly across an internet network, infecting other machines, Curran said. It seems to also be finding passwords on each infected computer and using those to spread as well. There seems to be no kill switch on this occasion. We reached out to the NSA with questions about its ability to stop the spread of the current ransomware and its perceived responsibility moving forward. You can read Liu's full letter embedded below. Yeah! Oh my gosh! Did you ever think that you'd ever hear something like that? That a politician would correctly attribute the blame in an incident like this? I mean, because, you know, it's like I was saying before I started reading this article. You know, if the NSA hadn't petitioned for the creation of this shit, nobody would having to be dealing with it right now. So, like, what is the problem here? Is it the people that actually facilitated the shit? Or was it the NSA for discovering the vulnerability, neglecting to inform anybody about it, and probably exploiting the vulnerability themselves to their own advantage for a number of years? I mean, it's so beyond irresponsible. I mean, it's entirely irresponsible. But here's the thing. Again, I go with the suspicion that maybe there are other motives involved with the Petya ransomware. You know, maybe it is the NSA themselves who are deploying it and are just making use of the fact that it has been disseminated to the public, and they do have that cloak of the possibility that somebody, anybody, could have bought the damn thing and used it. And that's too much there. Anyway, the other article that I wanted to read on this, because I don't know if this will give us what I'm thinking it will, but I suspect, I hold in suspect the idea that this is some lowly little hacker just wanting to do this to make some Bitcoin. Here it is, and this is on TechCrunch.com. Today's huge ransomware attack has only made about $7,500 so far, and this was posted yesterday by Taylor Hatmaker. My apologies. Ransomware attacks are bigger than ever, but the payouts appear to be shrinking. While the ransomware suspected to be a variant of Petya makes headlines around the world, whoever set it loose isn't really making a whole lot of money, especially if they paid for the software to begin with. At the time of the writing, the Bitcoin address that today's global attack points to has only collected 29 payments for a total of 3.15 BTC, or $7,497. Considering the breadth of entities affected, that suggests that most victims know better than to cooperate. TechCrunch spoke with McAfee chief scientist Raj Samani, my apologies. Following the attack, he suggested that awareness campaigns against paying these kinds of cyber ransoms are having an impact. 20 people have paid. My guess is most of those are security researchers, Samani said. He cautions that paying the ransom doesn't even mean you'll get a decryption key back to unlock your system. With WannaCry, he notes that only an inconsequential amount of keys were returned to victims. Anomal, director of security strategy Travis Farrell echoed this sentiment in a statement to TechCrunch. Bitcoin payments currently already exceed $3,600, but it's essential that victims understand that payment may not actually allow them to access their data and may just fund hackers to commit further crimes. In spite of their scope, recent ransomware attacks don't approach the hundreds of millions that something like 2014's crypto wall was able to generate. WannaCry, by comparison, has made around $150,000 to date. Samani explained that the small payments you see with something like today's ransomware matches the market for an attack like this. Around $200 to $400 seems to be the going rate, Samani said. They've got to make it small enough because they want people to pay the ransom. We saw this with WannaCry. There are so few people that are making the payments, Samani said. I think the message of don't pay seems to be getting through. For now, there are way more questions than answers. One possibility is that the attack looked like ransomware, but that wasn't its main intended effect. What is ransomware? Samani asked. Well, in name, but it was destructive in nature. In this particular case, you have what is being publicized as a ransomware campaign, actually encrypting the master boot record. Whether the ransom was this attack's intentions or not, victims may no longer be able to pay up. As Gizmodo's Del Cameron reports, email host Postio has shut down the account associated with the Bitcoin ransom, meaning there is no longer a way for victims to pay or reach their attacker. Still, additional small payments appear to be trickling in. You can track them in real time with a Petya or at at Petya _payments, a bot by Quartz's Keith Collins. We'll continue following this story as it develops. Yeah. So, I've asserted that there's the possibility that there's state actors behind this, and I've also asserted another thing, and I think this one also bears mentioning again, is the idea that this ransomware is actually a live test of a taxation model. And, you know, they're finding out that Petya and the one I guess is not Petya or whatever, maybe it's a different one. You know, maybe if it's a different kind of taxation model that they wanted to test. And they're trying to find out compliance levels. You know? It's like let's test this out on gas stations, and you know, we'll see how that works. You know, how does that impact the local economy, and what level of compliance does it cause people to go along with? You know, now imagine that in your own life, where you've fallen in arrears to somebody over a smart contract or something mis-executes, and funds that were supposed to be available for one expenditure or another didn't make it through, and, you know, all of a sudden the smart lock on your apartment or other domicile is now locked. The operating system in your car will now no longer let it function. You can't get into your home, and your car doesn't work. If you do manage to get into your house, you're now probably trespassing according to some small fine print in some smart contract you signed that you're now in arrears to. So now you're potentially like committing a felony, entering into your own home illegally. The implications for this shit are broad, you know? And so the idea of like internet connecting everything, and, you know, hey, it can be replaced with something that fits on the internet, so let's just go ahead and do that. It's like the little treatise we started with suggested. It basically sets the internet itself up as a central point of failure, because it's the distribution conduit by which all this shit is transmitted from Internet of Things devices, your car, your little laptop, your home computer, your Xbox, all that business. You know, it's all connected to the internet, and it could all be disabled in a relatively short period of time. Fortunately, we still have books, but we should probably have more of them. Anywho, this was the article that I was talking about. And I don't know if this was I didn't read the whole thing, so okay. This is on Business Insider under Military and Defense, and this is written by Sonam Sheth. Or Sonam Sheth, my apologies. I'm a little bit further away from my monitor than normal. As a matter of fact, let me make that easier. I'm just going to go here. Trying not to sit on my chair because it restricts the blood flow in my hamstrings. And man, one of my hamstrings got kind of knocked a little bit today in jiu-jitsu. I don't know. I don't think I exploded or blew it out or anything like that, but it hurt. Anyway, here it is. Business Insider. They sow chaos wherever they can. A familiar actor may be behind the massive cyber attack that swept Europe. And I'm just going to say this right now. If this thing starts asserting that it's Russia, I'm going to terminate this. But anyway, let me continue. A colossal cyber attack on Tuesday has been wreaking havoc on countries and corporations across the globe, and some cybersecurity experts are zeroing in on a possible familiar name as the possible culprit. The attack, dubbed Petya, used a ransomware worm whose targets have included Ukrainian banks and airports, the Russian state-owned oil giant Rosneft, the British advertising company WPP, the U.S. pharmaceutical giant Merck, the shipping company A.P. Moller-Maersk, which said every branch of its business was affected. Analysts at several cybersecurity firms have confirmed that the Petya assault used a powerful and dangerous cyber weapon created by the U.S. National Security Agency that was leaked in April by the hacker group Shadow Brokers. Though it's too soon to be certain, experts say it seems as though a confluence of factors may be pointing to Russian state involvement in carrying out attack. And here we go. Ukraine was targeted. Blah, 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 blah. Fuck you. Nope. Not interested. I don't believe Russia is cyber attacking anybody. I honestly don't. And maybe I'm naive in this. Maybe there are Russian hackers and whatnot doing this kind of thing, but in all honesty, I don't believe it. I think that it's just as likely that it's actually the NSA. I mean, they created it. They were in possession of it for longer than anybody else. So, with the exception of the people that actually created it for them. The Equation, I think it's the Equation Group is asserted to be the people that created it, and that's why the Shadow Brokers hacked them and the NSA and everybody else. But the point being is, the NSA knows how to use the fucking thing. They asked for it to be created. They had possession of it for years. So, what's the greater likelihood? That some state actor in Russia decided to take the code, massage it a little bit, and then release it, and then target things that would potentially interact with their own networks? That doesn't sound very smart. Now, if you consider the possibility that it was the U.S., well, there's at least a large body of water distancing us from either side from connection to it, but there are avenues for it to get to us, guys, as proved by Merck and Maersk. Kind of weird that those names are so closely together. But anyway, it's one of those things of not seeing the forest for the trees. I mean, just you can't look past the obvious without at least a little bit of scrutiny, a little bit of consideration. Like I said, they had the tool. What's the likelihood they used it? I'd say pretty fucking high. Anyway, in the wake of all this business, we're seeing additional calls for... wait. Here. We're not quite done with this. We are not quite done with this. I have at least one more article that I would like to cover about this. And it's about the basis of this thing, Eternal Blue. And this one is on Wired Magazine. I don't know how serious or trustworthy they are, but we're just going to go with it anyway. And this is wired.co.uk. Everything you need to know about Eternal Blue, the NSA exploit linked to Petya and WannaCry. The Eternal Blue vulnerability was first seen following its publication by the Shadow Brokers hacking group. Tens of thousands of computers have been hit by two major ransomware attacks in recent months. WannaCry, which took down large parts of the NHS, and Petya/non-Petya, a suspected worm that's still wreaking havoc across the globe. At the center of these ransomware outbreaks is a Microsoft Windows security vulnerability called Eternal Blue. To keep you up to speed on the exploit, here's everything we know about it. What is Eternal Blue? Eternal Blue is the name given to a software vulnerability in Microsoft's Windows operating system. The tech giant has called it Eternal Blue MS17-010 and issued a security update for the flaw on March 14th. The patch was issued before WannaCry ransomware spread across the world, and those who had updated early would have been protected. The vulnerability works by exploiting the Microsoft Server Message Block 1.0. The SMB is a network file sharing protocol and allows applications on a computer to read and write to files and to request services that are on the same network. Microsoft says the security update it issued is critical, and following WannaCry, it released a rare Windows XP patch after officially ending support for the software in 2014. XP. People are still using fucking XP. Can you believe that shit? Can I check if my machine is vulnerable? Well, if you see the XP splash logo on the front, probably. or probably even 98 or 95. I'm not even sure on that. Multiple versions of Windows are vulnerable to Eternal Blue. The severity ratings indicated for each affected software assume the potential maximum impact of the vulnerability, Microsoft says in a statement, which I don't know if we're going to actually get to tonight. The company's security page details version of Windows Vista servers, Windows Server 2008, Windows 7, Windows Server 2008 R2, Windows 8.1, Windows Server 2012, and Windows Server 2012 R2, Windows RT 8.1, Windows 10, and Windows Server 2016 can all be impacted by the Eternal Blue exploit. Now think about that for a moment. All the way from Windows XP through Windows Server 2016 could be impacted by Eternal Blue. Don't you think they could have saved a lot of fucking money? I mean, there's a potential that this has been used all that fucking time on a limited scale without anybody knowing. Anyway, continuing. Hopefully, security group ESET has created helpfully, a security group ESET has created a free tool that will check to see if the version of Windows you're running is vulnerable to Eternal Blue. The danger is not the WannaCry ransomware itself, but in the Eternal Blue exploit, which has been using the vulnerability in unpatched Microsoft systems to spread the infection to other unpatched computers, the company explains. How do I protect against Eternal Blue? From what we have seen in both WannaCry and Petya, the MS17-010 vulnerability can be exploited in a number of ways. During WannaCry, it was spread through emails, and within Petya, it is believed, although not confirmed, to have spread through a software update from a Ukrainian company. The best way to be protected from Eternal Blue is to install the Microsoft patch detailed above. This will stop the SMB protocol being exploited even if attempts are made to do so. Other basic security advice should be followed, including not clicking on links from unknown email senders and not opening attachments where the source is dubious. Always very, very, very good ComSec policies to adopt. So yeah, keep your shit updated, man. But again, I just find it astounding, that this security vulnerability persisted now for about a decade in all of Microsoft's products, or at least it looks like a great number of them, and nothing was done to notify Microsoft of it. I mean, if there were ever a way to assess the total monetary and whatever other impact of the release of this thing, then the NSA, I think, should be held legally liable for that. I mean, the creation of the tool and the the lack of disclosure of the exploit created the possibility for this shit. So I think that means they bear the brunt of the responsibility for its creation and use, whether or not it was them actually getting the fun out of using it, you know. Anyway, I do want to kick back into some music here, and I'm trying to decide exactly what to play. I do have quite a bit of newer stuff in my directories have been kind of dodgy today. I'm kind of wondering about shit, you know. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw in a little bit of textures here. Regenesis here on CoinMetal. And that was Rio Grande Blood by Ministry. Hey. And because I didn't want to spend the entire evening talking about all that virus shit, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about crypto, but before I diverge entirely off of it, I just wanted to touch again on that point that, you know, the purpose of these tools that were outed, that were put out by the shadow brokers, was for greater knowledge of our activities, you know, for hacking into our shit so they can tell what we're doing, right? But in doing so, it creates an atmosphere where it's suddenly okay to just track everybody's data, you know, and companies latch onto that, you know, and also again with the idea that if you do create a tool, you know, that there's no telling that you're going to be the one that gets to use it, or that the victims of it are actually the ones that you intended it for or designed it for. There's no guarantees there. Anyway, so like I said, I want to get off of that for the night because, I mean, it is impacting people still, and I'm sure we'll probably touch just a little bit about it on Friday, you know, because we'll have another 2 days for it to have progressed by then. But for right now, I wanted to touch on something a little more near and dear to us here in crypto, and this one is on Bitcoin.com. IMF publishes report detailing regulatory recommendations for the cryptocurrency industries. This was written by Samuel Hague on June 28th of 2017. And let's go for it. International Monetary Fund, IMF, has released a report that focuses on advancements within the fintech industry, specifically looking at the rapidly evolving cross-border payments industry. An emphasis is placed on discussing distributed ledger technology, which is presented as having the, quote, potential to offer important service improvements and cost savings. Much of the report seeks to define and classify the cryptocurrency industry, whilst highlighting key concerns and recommendations with regards to regulators and lawmakers. And also read EU considering adopting anti-money laundering laws that address Bitcoin exchanges. Why is everybody so concerned about fucking money laundering with regard to cryptocurrencies? I don't get it. The IMF report seeks to provide detailed classifications for distributed ledger technology. Good, not Bitcoin. The IMF has released a report that provides detailed analysis of cryptocurrency technology and the potential implications that such may have for lawmakers, governments, and financial institutions. The report stresses that these, quote, new technologies may require jurisdictions to revise rules governing ownership and contractual rights and obligations, unquote. Greater KYC guidelines, regulatory oversight, and regulation pertaining to new cryptocurrency development, and a critical discussion pertaining to balancing privacy and transparency considerations are recommended as prospective policy considerations for governments in assessing DLTs. Framings such as necessary in order to gain widespread consumer trust in distributed ledger technology, DLT. Greater regulatory oversight was also advocated for the purposes of combating money laundering, tax evasion, and terrorist financing. Most importantly, tax evasion. The IMF report seeks to provide detailed classifications for distributed ledger technology. The report categorizes DLT as being either permissionless or permissioned. Permissionless DLTs are likened to Bitcoin and described as open schemes that could be very disruptive if successfully implemented. Permissioned DLTs, on the other hand, are defined as having a validation process that is controlled by a pre-selected group of participants, consortium, or managed by one organization, fully private. The report's classifications may inform governments' future cryptocurrency regulations. The IMF report seeks to demarcate between intrinsic tokens and asset-based tokens. DLT records the transfer of ownership of digital tokens, which are essentially units in a ledger. They can either have intrinsic value, an intrinsic token like Bitcoin, or be digital representations of a physical or digital asset that exists outside the ledger. An asset-based token representing an interest in another asset, such as securities, which you should never do. You can never do that, actually, but we won't go there today. This semantic differentiation is important as it could be used as the basis to develop separate juridical? Wow. Juridical. That's a word? Separate juridical frameworks for tokens tied to a fully developed and functioning platform/project. I think just judicial frameworks, that works better. Develop separate judicial frameworks for tokens tied to a fully developed and functioning platform/project, and tokens that have been issued by a project that is conducting an ICO, allowing for the demarcation to be used as a basis for regulators to clamp down on the rapidly proliferating ICO industry. Now, that's interesting. I'm going to have to talk about that a little bit here. The report also discusses the antagonism, the decentralized trustless execution of transactions on blockchain networks, increasingly becoming tied to real-world transactions. The legal status of a digital token and the legal effect of its transfer are not clear. For example, would the transfer of an asset-backed token, ergo representing a security, on a ledger transfer legal ownership of the security? Dude, have you ever heard of a fucking comma? I mean, I can see at least 5 spots for that there's a comma needed in this fucking sentence that would straighten out all the little tenses issues. Anyway, continuing. On a ledger transfer, legal ownership of a security, or would registration outside the ledger, ergo in a corporate share registry, still be required? Jurisdictions are trying to develop answers to these questions, but country practice varies. The resolution of these questions is crucial for the economy to function and will require more thought by policymakers. The IMF report has a number of positive implications for the cryptocurrency industry. The report advocates that policymakers will need to be nimble, experimental, and cooperative, and ultimately encourages governments to work together in developing an inclusive regulatory apparatus for distributed ledger technology. The IMF also promotes the adoption of distributed ledger technology on the part of banks and financial institutions and encourages the creation of regulatory sandboxes for the purposes of fostering the innovative and dynamic DLT industry. That's kind of stupid, but okay. The IMF report has a number of positive implications for the cryptocurrency industry. The encouragement of inclusive regulatory frameworks and the promotion of governments seeking to work with the DLT industry shows that major global economic institutions are recognizing the innovative potential of Bitcoin and seeking to harness rather than oppress such. That's bullshit. The report also recognized that the distributed ledger technology is producing an incredible array of what are essentially free technological breakthroughs. Yeah, so quit trying to put a fucking foot on its throat. Damn it. Despite signifying a path toward mainstream adoption for cryptocurrencies and digital ledger technology, there are many within the cryptocurrency community that are deeply skeptical of the IMF's report. Some fear that blockchain and distributed ledger technology will become another tool wielded by the state for centralization and control. The report's cautious recognition of Bitcoin's disruptive potential and classification of Bitcoin as a permissionless token may signify a preference toward the development and use of DLT projects that compete with Bitcoin's utility, but can be subject to influence from governments and institutions. Yeah. Well, personally, I think that the whole idea is that they will develop a quote-unquote regulatory framework with people that will actually comply with them or are in some current compliance status with them, and that they'll develop their whole ideology there, and then they'll try to apply it to people like you and me and other cryptocurrencies. And ultimately, I really think that this is more of a stall. I mean, we hear about this all the time in cryptocurrencies, where, you know, such and such government, such and such organization is going to clamp down on Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, and, you know, they're gonna develop some regulatory framework that everybody else is going to have to abide by. And we see again and again where they get really kind of excited about it in the news, you know, where, like, I think China and Russia, they've both had, I've read, I believe even on this show, multiple articles suggesting that the national governments of either China or Russia were going to get harsh on Bitcoin regulation, and it's never happened. You know, it's like they get tentative. It's like this segregated witness thing, you know, where now there's this New York agreement, which doesn't really have a whole lot of support other than the people that were supporting the possibility of it. And like there's a chart I looked up that shows all the people that intend to apply the SegWit 2x patch on sometime in July. I can't remember the specific date, if it's available, of course. But they're only signaling intent. You know, they're not actually signaling that they're going to actually do it. You know, they're not signaling express support for BIP9. Just that they're ready to support it, and that they intend to support it if it's released. I think it's all a joke. You know, the fact of the matter, I think, is that the vast majority of miners don't want segregated witness. But that's just my take on it, you know. I could be wrong. I have been wrong before. I reserve that right on this show, because in fact I am human. But yeah, as far as developing any kind of regulatory framework, I expect that whatever country actually gets serious about it, I think they'll be the first to lose out on innovation. And we're seeing that in New York. I mean, 2 years later, New York is not considered the FinCEN hub of the fucking universe anymore, if it ever was. But it was a major development center for digital finance up until relatively recently. I mean, it still is to some extent in legacy finance. But I don't think that they have the same kind of grip over crypto, and I think that whatever grip that they do have, it'll remain relatively limited and mostly amongst people who are already rich. Yeah, like you got like Gemini, which from what I understand is a decent exchange, and this is not a hack on them or anything, but they are based in New York, and that's kind of a shit stain mark. But that's my feeling. I've been to New York, and I don't know. It's an interesting place, but I really think it runs on caffeine, cocaine, nicotine, and guilt. It's like they can't get out of bed unless they feel like they're getting away with something. Like the man has the potential of dropping the hammer on them for any second for doing something wrong. And I don't know. I find that completely objectionable. I'd rather the threat not be there, because then I'm free to do shit like innovate. Anyway, one more on this before we close out this particular episode, and this one looks relatively short. Yeah, it's relatively short. We can do it. And this one's on CoinGeek. World Economic Forum publishes white paper on blockchain governance. And this was published about an hour and 34 minutes ago. Shit, this damn near that was during this show. Anyway, and this was by CoinGeek, whoever that is. No indication of penis. The World Economic Forum has published a new white paper on blockchain governance, arguing for a greater spirit of collaboration between diverse blockchain stakeholders. The report, entitled Realizing the Potential of the Blockchain, argued that a broader collaborative approach would maximize the potential of the blockchain ecosystem, thought to hold many future benefits for industry and governance globally. Echoing the collaborative spirit of development consortia like R3 and Hyperledger, the report suggests that stakeholders could go further, developing distributed networks of development expertise to advance the technology and its potential use cases. With stakeholders worldwide pulling together, the research paper argues that the impact could be significant, massively outscaling any collaborative efforts yet to be seen in blockchain development. According to the report, collaboration allows for expertise from a broad range of stakeholder sources to be pooled and focused on advanced distributed ledger technology. Noting the impact existing consortia have had on shaping the technology to date, it suggests a broader network of stakeholders could help accelerate the growth and development of the technology across three main area blockchain platforms, blockchain applications, and the blockchain ecosystem more broadly. Writing in the introduction to the paper, Richard Simmons of the World Economic Forum said that in aspiring to reach its potential, blockchain necessitates greater cooperation and joint development worldwide. The extent to which this new technology realizes its potential will depend in substantial part upon how well stakeholders steward its development. There remain important open governance questions regarding both the functioning of the technology and its current and potential applications. In addition to proposing the need for greater collaboration, the report also outlines an envisaged structure or taxonomy for how these efforts could be organized. While ambitious in its scope and recommendations, the report has been welcomed by influential industry stakeholders, including the heads of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance and Hyperledger, two projects already dedicated to advancing cooperation in blockchain development. Jeremy Miller from the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance described the move as welcomed in supporting the existing aims of blockchain consortia and development partnerships. Governance is critical to accelerate mainstream adoption of blockchain technology, and the work of the World Economic Forum, along with Don and Alex, is most welcomed. Whatever. Dude, this technology is meant to compete. And if we're busy jerking each other off in collaborative meetings, we aren't independently developing shit that can compete with other shit, both existing and future shit. I don't know why people don't get this. You know, it's like this push for segregated witness and the alternate push for Bitcoin Unlimited. When this debate first started, I started suggesting right off the bat, if these things are so radically different from the way that Bitcoin currently functions, why not release them as altcoins first and then see how that works out? You know, and it seemed to me that all of the effort that had been put into it could have just as easily been supporting a coin that could be trading up there alongside Ethereum right now. But rather than have that kind of confidence in their project, they've been trying to coattail it onto Bitcoin. And honestly, I think it's kind of a chicken shit move. It's just, and I honestly feel that if segregated witness had been implemented when they first started trying to push it onto the public, or onto the miners or whatever, that we would have seen this ICO explosion happening within Bitcoin instead of Ethereum. That all of these scammers that have been generating millions of dollars in minutes, while it would have been nice initially to have that money, we would end up having to wear the stain for all of the fallout for that mindless distribution of funds. And I don't see that as being good for Bitcoin in the longer term. I mean, there's already enough fuckery going on in cryptocurrencies. That's not to suggest that proportionally there's any more than in legacy markets, because honestly I don't believe that's the case. I'm one of those people that believe that regulations basically they exist to limit the access of the public to that particular marketplace. So the push to quote unquote legalize and regulate and all that within cryptocurrencies is an effort of taking the technology and your participation in it out of your hands. And that's just the way I see it. But you know, more and more it's one of these things where you cannot have the system where the interests aren't spreading along with the scale. You know, you need people to be supporting it along the way. You can't just put it all on one company, all on one server, all on one protocol. You can't do it. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And if you need proof of that, just look over at XVG. And no, this is not a sales pitch for XVG. I'm just saying that if you look at what we've been going through as far as price spikes and whatnot, we're traveling a lot in the spikes with other stuff. But if you notice that our new lows are higher than our old lows. Okay, I mean we're in some familiar territory at the moment, but the last time I checked the chart, there's all kinds of breakout potential there. You know, I mean, there's a lot of pressure, a lot of downward pressure on the sell side, but it gets through that and it's clear sailing up. You know, but we're not Ethereum based. We're more or less related to Bitcoin in that aspect, but we're independent enough off of those that we have some bleed over effect, but a lot of our rhythm is our own. You know, we've gone through hype cycles and whatnot, but they've been temporary, and you know, we've just been kept showing up this whole time. You know, Verge Dev has not gone away the whole time. He's been doing GitHub commits and doing things to augment the coin and whatnot, but not at such a rate that he actually is burnt out on it or is no longer interested in supporting the project. And I think that's what kind of separates Verge from a lot of the pack, where we've seen that they lose their entire development team. The coin gets completely orphaned, and then somebody will come along and pick it up and carry it along again. Or they'll get bought by somebody else, like Potcoin did. You know, but you know, take a good look at that chart. You'll see that a lot of the action is our own. You know, it's not flipping and whatnot on the rhythms of other coins. Like Ethereum will drastically impact all of the ICOs that are piggybacked on it, and the same would be true with Bitcoin. And it kind of is already, but I'm just saying that if there were that type of scale on top of Bitcoin, they would all be impacted along with the price of Bitcoin, or the quote-unquote exchange rate, as we like to refer to it on this show. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and close this bad boy out. Got about 5 minutes left, enough for a last dance. My normal little diatribe for the few minutes that we have left. And so on Friday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we will be back again after we get our asses kicked at Jiu-Jitsu. Although I got to wonder, man, I got a couple injuries now. Might need to slow up for a week or two, you know. I've been consistently going for months now, and so it might be time to slow up just a tad. Kind of let the wounds heal before I get back to the mat, you know. But in any case, until then, you can find me in the IRC chat room for Verge Currency. You can also find me on Twitter and Facebook. I do have these I am recording these and putting them up on my YouTube channel. So, you know, if you don't like metal, you know, there's that option for you. You just got to wait a little bit of time, and I post them up on my YouTube channel. And so until then, I want y'all to trade safe, do your homework, and watch out for your bunghole, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And so we're going to go ahead and close it out with a little bit of Megadeth here off of Dystopia. The threat is real. Last Dance here on CoinMetal. Y'all have an excellent evening.